Amazon. Wow, what a little pump. Nice little pump action. Welcome in, guys. Welcome in. Tom with this Nvidia flow. What? Insanely crazy. They hate everything. What's going on, Derek? Welcome in. Let's see if we get some more attention here. What's going on, guys? What's going on? Welcome in. Welcome in. Keith, you're shorting Tesla. Can't blame you. Can't blame you. What's going on, Chris? What's going on, FW? Welcome in, guys. Probably a few minutes or so. Let some more of the traders trickle in here. And supposedly Nvidia is green right now. Wasn't too many earnings that I actually had my spotlight on that I really wanted to look at for momentum tomorrow. I think that's one of the only things. Just considering the fact that Nvidia is just flat right now, didn't really pique my attention more so. So it's on the back burner for Watchlist, but not something I'm really paying too much attention to. I see where my low defined resistance is. So if we do want to get a continuation, maybe we get some analyst upgrades. I'll point that out, see where our resistance is, and I'll pretty much give you an update on that. But other than that, pretty much I'll start off with SPY. But great price action today, I think, overall. You know, they kind of just pretty much put us flat for most of the morning, which we've had that assumption for quite a few days already where we end up just getting this little range bound movement until we get that sporadic movement. And while the shorts pretty much just get squeezed today. The shorts got squeezed pretty much really heavily, and I think that's we're gonna continue to see that. That's literally what we've been seeing is that every time if you're a bear that you started to get happy, the market just found a way to end up squeezing you out, and it just continues to go north. And I mean, I've seen pretty much gave you guys my levels in which I was watching. I think I mentioned a hard resistance in terms of what I was watching at SPY of 448. We literally tapped that today, and then we pulled back. So just taking it day by level right now, I think if you're really trying to hold shorts and swing them, it's really a hit or miss. That's really the issue that you're having right now. And so you don't want to get caught on the wrong side of price action. That's why you pretty much just hear me repeatedly saying, be careful with what you swing, right? But I think the headline that came out of the Fed minutes, it was bad news overall. It's just that it looks like the market anticipated the news that actually had already came out. It didn't feel like there was anything new, or if they were adding any kind of pressure to the overall market. So in my terms, that's why the market ended up continuing to get a little push. We saw a little reversal, nice rally right into the end of the day there. So just the fact that the news wasn't worse than what we expected, it seems like the market had already priced in what was going to be expected about the rate hike coming in next month and so forth. So that's why I expected the market to go up, and I wasn't pretty much surprised. How did you have the ticker plus custom name on the left? Um, it's actually an indicator. It's one of the indicators that you can actually go in if you actually go under indicators and type in watermark. I think which one was it? Let me see which one if I remember which one it was. Dun, dun, dun. I want to say it's this one right here. It's by AGFX Trading. I believe that's the one, and then you can get that towards the bottom left corner there. If that's what you're talking about, Tommy. But again, it was a positive note here today. We saw the little movement. I was expecting the first reaction to be the wrong reaction. We had the little bit of a dip, then we just saw the nice rip. So, no surprise in terms of what I saw today for the price action. I think everyone's just waiting for that drastic movement in which we get the wild swing for SPY to go over 450, or we pretty much flush right back under 446 or 443 rather. But right now, we're pretty much just sitting in a range. We're sitting a little bit in a megaphone action, and that's why we saw the little bit of a regression into the close because we did pretty much smack our head off of the resistance. But bigger picture wise, again, we hit my level that I had as a hard resistance, 448, pretty much almost flat. So we hit that. We hit pretty much pull back to the bottom of my zone that I had, sitting right here around the low 446 mark. And so I'm gonna look to see if we end up holding this 446 mark. If we hold 446, retest 448 by morning. If we hopefully don't gap over it, and then if we continue this uptrend, market continues to stay bullish, then I do have us going into the lower end of 450 to 450 half is which I would potentially have as my overall top, and that may end up being the spot where I risk on in terms of scaling into puts. Okay, but if we don't get that move towards 450, then I'm gonna end up trying to just wait until the trend really changes direction here. I'm not trying to force it here at 448. I ended up scalping it. I didn't. I pretty much stayed sideline this afternoon, but I'm gonna wait for the trend to really show itself if we don't end up getting a squeeze north of 448 on SPY. Okay, so that's pretty much what my game plan is, and that's why you always have to get a game plan. I could have had the game plan of shorting at 448, and as we see, that was pretty much dead on resistance, like I mentioned yesterday afternoon, and then we regress right down to 446. So my game plan is if we get a push north of 450 here, we probably scale in right around 450 on puts, and then I'll see exactly what the market does there, having my stop loss in. But ideally, I would start scaling into puts at 450 because, in my opinion and perspective, is that the market really wants to squeeze everyone out that's holding puts. We see the tape, and you pretty much hear me reading it out during market live. Is that there's puts coming in left and right. The market's not going to necessarily just pay out all of those puts that continue to go out. And as you see today, they puts literally just got squeezed out today. Whatever put you were holding probably went down about 50% instantly today. So I would expect that we get a little bit more of a squeeze, but I'm not going to be convinced on this U-turn to the downside until the market trend really shows itself. And then we'd have to really end up breaking down below 443. And even below 443, we still have the completion of the gap here that concludes at a marker here of 440. So 443, under the 443, we'll potentially get the gap fill here at 440. And under that 440, I have this blue line in which this is going to be potentially my breakdown point. If we end up getting down below this 437 mark, I think that's when we're going to end up seeing that flush that everyone's been waiting for, feels like since last year. All right. But that's going to be potentially what I'm looking at in a broader perspective. So either we retest the 448 or gap over it, and then we see 450 rather quickly. Otherwise, we end up breaking down from this 446. We potentially get right back under the 443 to complete the gap fill of 440. And then I have a hard support level here right around 437. All right. So that's big picture in terms of my major levels and what I'm watching. But again, we're sitting at the resistance. If I pretty much just down the time frame here so you can see in real time here, you had this nice little formation. You smacked your head on resistance, support, right back into the resistance in which we wicked into my hard resistance level, and regressed. So do we hold this little zone that I have here at 446 low and break down, or do we just break north of that 448 mark is what I'll be watching for tomorrow. Keep in mind, we also do have the Fed speakers tomorrow. There's going to be two Fed speakers. I know one is Bullard. I forgot the name of the other Fed speaker tomorrow. So that's something that's probably going to be another highlight tomorrow. We'll see if there's any whipsaw action out of that. But that's going to be something that's going to be a highlight as well tomorrow. So it feels like every day this week we have some kind of headline, some kind of news. The fact that I think Bullard actually speaks a little bit earlier tomorrow, I believe roughly around 11:30 a.m. Eastern. So I think that actually hopefully doesn't make us have to wait for most of the day and keep us in a box that we continually have to hear about. Market just continue puts us in a box and we just go top to bottom in a range. All right. So that's pretty much as far as SPY. Just getting to tickers that I continually watch and some that catch my attention here. You heard me pretty much talking about Tesla. You see the nice little ascending channel action we have. We pretty much also smacked resistance right here on this little megaphone action as well. So I'm going to look to see if we regress, if we end up going right back down under this 917 level. And then 902 is that hard breakdown level that I have. If we break under 902, then we pretty much flush, and 880 is pretty much a given. As you see, we also do have the gap fill here under that 893 level. So that's pretty much as far as my downside movement. Otherwise, if we can continue to break north here over that 926, I'm potentially targeting close enough to 950 here, 948 to 949, in which will smack our head on the resistance of this little channel formation that we have. All right. I think at that point, that 948 or so, I will start to scale into puts on Tesla, and then hopefully potentially see that regress and downfall. But again, game plan is the biggest part. So I'm not going to end up trying to short it unless we break under 902. I'm not going to end up shorting Tesla, and I'm not going to end up shorting it again until we get up north towards 948. Otherwise, I think we still have a little bit more range here. We could probably retest the 917 mark. What 916? I think 916 to 917 mark that we have here down below in the middle of this little megaphone, and then we can potentially continue to go north. So that's why I say wait for the drastic measures in which those are going to be key levels. So 917 is your little buy the dip opportunity. Otherwise, 902 is your short, and I would start to scale in at 948 if we do get continuation to the upside tomorrow. All right. So that's Tesla. Other one, and I'm pretty sure you heard Avery talking about Boeing. Boeing just seems to look just like an ideal scenario in which we're going to see a nice little melt up. I know they hit that Boeing move yesterday. I think it was up about $8 yesterday. That was a tremendous move out of it. You see the little gap up that we ended up having. But it is starting to show itself as an inverted head and shoulders. What actually interests me more here is the gap fill that you have as well. You'll get a gap fill here north of 220.43, and then that completes at 220.91. So I do like that gap fill. If we get to move over that gap fill, there is a little bit of a hard resistance that we're sitting at right about here. Level is sitting right around 222 half, you could say. So that's another resistance level. But I'm looking to see on a bigger time frame here, if I zoom out for you so you see the bigger formation, is that, and I think I can go to 4 hour. You see the little descending broadening wedge type formation that we have. Now, if you look to see where the resistance is, if we do get continuation out of this move, as I go back in, you now see where your defined resistance levels in which you have potentially a move towards 226, 227 here. So that's what I'm going to be potentially looking at. But again, gap fill and then a little bit of a resistance around 222 half. And we could see that full blown extension of this move towards 226, 227. And that's what I like about that. All right. So I'm going to keep an eye on that one. Another name that just crossed my attention today was LMT. I know with all the news about Russia, Ukraine, defense stock, we would expect it to continue to grind higher. It just looks like it actually smacked its head on a little bit of a resistance here. You had this nice little ascending broadening wedge type formation. We smacked our head on resistance, rejected right into the close. So I'm going to look potentially for a breakdown here under this 384 mark. And then we see that we have a wick low here in which I have a nice little zone between this 379 towards 378. That'll be potentially our PT1, 378 to 379. Otherwise, we break below that 378, and I have a potentially next support zone here at 374 to 375 will be my next support zone. All right. So that's what I'll be watching, but primarily because of the fact that you broke down from the ascending running wedge, you see you smacked your head on resistance. So ideally, the fact that since you already rejected, you would expect continuation, break down on that key level, that 384, and then that'll put us right into our target levels, and which we'll play them level by level. All right. So that's one I'll keep an eye on. Another one that caught my attention with the formation was square. Just the fact that we had this nice little pennant action, nice little wedge, you could say. We're pretty much sitting right at support here after hours. I'm going to look to see if we pretty much hold this 108 level and then get a push towards 113 to potentially break out of this wedge north towards the gap fill. Otherwise, if we can't hold 108, then you see where the gap fill is below, sitting right below 104.81, and then it completes here at 102.90. So very much a directional move here, and we'll see where this key level of 108 if it holds here or if it doesn't, and we could make that a directional play with the gap above and the gap below. All right, so that one's pretty much very simple to understand, in terms of gap above, gap below, and wait for the breakout. Otherwise, if we hold that 108 tomorrow, we see a bullish market tomorrow with momentum, then you know that you're going to hit into some resistance around 113 if you're trying to play that from below this little wedge action. All right, another one that's pretty much just on my watch list per se. I just like the fact that it was setting up pretty nicely. Why does it look? I think it was more so on the 15 minute. I may have said it. Probably 30. All right. So looking at CVS, just get a pretty much a visual on this little wedge formation that you have. Very defined resistance points. As you see, you wick the resistance here if I try to zoom in for you. But the resistance line pretty much aligns pretty much textbook. You wick over the resistance. We see that we're going to hit our heads into some resistance here at 104, close enough, just above 104 half. We're going to hit our head on some resistance. But the reason why I say that is that it's setting up for a bigger formation. If I zoom out towards the 4 hour, and this is where you get the bigger picture, is that you see that you pretty much have this like nice little ascending channel type formation in which you're gonna likely end up hitting your head on resistance that was prior support, and we're gonna get a continuation to the downtrend. So that's what I'm looking at in terms of this one. I know that premiums are also cheap. Considering the fact that we're going into Thursday, premiums are even going to get even cheaper. So if we get over to this 104, about 104 half and above, I'm going to look to get a short position in which that'll likely be an early entry right at the resistance point, and that way I can take that right down. So I would love to end up getting that play just because of the fact that I know the premiums are cheap. It's a beautiful retest after a breakdown, and then we'll play it down towards our zones here, in which I have 100 as our next potential zone. Um, 100 half to 100 to yeah 100 half to about 111 will be my first PT. Next zone I have sitting is 99 half towards 98. And then the last thing is the gap fill, and that's why it's highlighted in red. You see the gap fill all the way down below. All right. So that's one, just taking advantage of the cheap premiums and the nice little break, a nice retest, and we'll see the nice next leg down. That's what I'll be looking for on CVS. And just the last one that I had noting was a Airbnb. You saw me call this one out. Pretty much was just a textbook move. You had a beautiful little ascending triangle this morning, but I'm gonna look to see continuation. We wicked right into one of the gap fills, and you heard me talk about this yesterday. It was on the watch list yesterday. We had the two gap fills, and that's what really caught my attention off of Airbnb. I'm gonna look to see if we get a continuation on this one towards the 195 half. So I'm gonna look to see that one. Potentially, maybe even retrace down towards 182, high 182, and that'll be potentially my dip buy opportunity there on that one. So 182, if we get that dip buy potentially, then we take that right back up towards 195, and that'll be a beautiful play in which we can see pretty much an explosive move out of that. But other than that, those are the names that I was particularly watching. I know that you guys pretty much just mentioned two names. One was Nvidia, which I believe is still relatively flat, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it's still flat. I mean, I know that their earnings were good. It's just that, and I mentioned it pretty much to someone in the chat, and I even screenshotted after, is that when you see a stock move so much ahead of their earnings, that's when you definitely want to be cautious. And Nvidia was one of those names where you pretty much saw that call activity just hitting the tape since last week, and you heard us just repeatedly saying it on live. You wanted to be aware of the fact that not only was the call flow so heavy, but also the fact that it had already moved. We saw one day that it was up about north of $17 on the day. It was a heavy move already that already took place. And so usually the implied move is basically on a weekly basis. It's not just for the earnings itself per se. Okay? And that's why we saw that drastic move already took place before the earnings. And that's why it's relatively flat. It's not the fact that it was bad earnings, it was in fact good earnings. It's just that what you basically see right now is somewhat of a profit taking. That's basically all you're seeing. It could have regressed even more had it been even more overbought territory, but it's just relatively just sitting in a nice little spot right now. I think maybe yesterday or so, someone asked me about it, and I still have the same setup that I had before, in which if we get analyst upgrades tomorrow, maybe we actually see that explosive move come tomorrow, in which we can take advantage of the upside, in which we'll pretty much smack our head around resistance close enough to 260, 276 to 277, and that'll be a beautiful move tomorrow if the market pretty much wills it, and we would need the market momentum to continue tomorrow. So 276, 277 will be a potential overhead resistance that we're seeing on over this uptrend. Otherwise, if the market starts to roll over, we're gonna see this start to pretty much start to flush, and we'll break down under 256. Under that 256 level, I do have a small zone at 253, but ideally the gap fill is what's going to be in sight under the 247 and completing at 243. So that's ideally in which your two range is on what I'm looking at. Either you again head towards 276, 277, or you're likely looking at that gap fill here below 247. That's pretty much what I'm expecting. So either way, and there's always, as far as the market momentum, we would expect the momentum tomorrow. But when you are doing your watch list, always game plan for both directions. All right, that's always something that you have to plan for. So there's no definitive answer whether we're going to be green or red tomorrow. We could see some kind of headline come out with Russia or Ukraine, or there could be some kind of more continued Fed announcement or speaker that makes some kind of dumb comment that sends the market south. So always prepare for both directions. But hopefully that gives you a better idea of what you're looking at for Nvidia. I do think we're going to end up getting that push though towards that 276 to 277 after some analyst upgrades. But we are going to need the market green tomorrow in order to get that kind of momentum to continue. All right. Other one was Walmart. I mean, Walmart just relatively looks flat. I definitely do not like how this chart looks. And this is probably one of the biggest things that those of you who's pretty much been on my live at night as well, is that you pretty much notice that I'm very big on when the fact that there's like a heavy downtrend. I'm really not a fan of that. Usually I end up having to wait to see when that downtrend breaks. And the fact that this has not broken that downtrend, it just tells me right now just to stay sidelined on Walmart. There's nothing here that tells me to buy this in terms of a breakout. That's what I don't like about this. Now, I mean, I probably wouldn't catch my attention until we got over about 135. But if it doesn't break that 135 level, I think I would probably just stay sideline, in which this downtrend can just continue to just even make lower lows. And that's what you don't want to be a part of. So it's basically like catching a knife, because until you break this downtrend, you see some meaningful action over 135, you're not going to get any further price action going north. That really gives you confidence there. The only other thing that I can pretty much point out here is also you do have a gap fill that was never completed. It would complete at 137. So that's just something to maybe keep in mind. We could possibly see some better price action come tomorrow morning, maybe following some upgrades or whatnot. Maybe a further headline tomorrow. But nothing here that tells me to go out tomorrow and buy this in terms of a breakout of some sort. It's still in a defined downtrend, is what I want to say. All right. But I think those are the ones I was watching. As far as the other earnings that caught my attention also was AMAT. This was actually holding up pretty well. I don't know why I actually had this one charted already. That's very odd. Don't remember charting this one. Let me just see if I can update the chart really quickly. Maybe make some fixes. Let's see. So pretty much what I'm looking at is you do have what I would say is maybe a little bit of a bear flag type formation, somewhat. And it looks like it's a little bit off. Let's see if we can adjust the line here. Maybe look a little more parallel. Probably even bring it down a little lower. Let's see. Yeah, it hit its head right on that resistance right there. So pretty much what I was looking at here is that I was expecting this to end up dropping to fill the gap below. Didn't get that scenario. So we're pretty much about to hit our head into resistance here come tomorrow at 147.5. And I would expect that to end up being a hard resistance in which we pretty much reject and come back down. Now, granted the fact again, if market ends up continuing to persist, let me see where our next resistance is on AMAT. Let's take a look and see where we're looking at for resistance in terms of this one here. So pretty much sitting at 146. We do have resistance 146.29 will be one of our resistance zone here. 146.29. Otherwise, next zone is 147.62 is what we're looking at. So 147.62 will be our next pivot point that we're looking at in terms of resistance. That pretty much aligns right in terms of where my resistance point was on this little channel action. If we break north of that, then we have pretty much the 1 month high is what's really going to catch my attention here. And that 1 month high is sitting at 165.89. So that's quite the ride up, 165.89. That is quite the ride that we're pretty much looking at all the way up here. So I guess not much resistance in terms of what we're watching for, but right around 165.89 is what you're looking at in terms of breaking the 1 month high. All right. So that's potentially what I'll be looking at, but I would expect that 147 half here we're gonna see resistance and it's gonna come right back down. Kind of seems a little bit more like a bear flag type scenario, and then we just break down. But it's left to be seen once we end up hitting that 147 half, and then we'll see where we go from there. All right. I saw DoorDash did phenomenal. That was insanely crazy. I think Tom was pretty much beating himself up after hours also, just because of the fact that I think he felt like it was going to end up breaking out, and the call flow was just there through the flow alerts. But I think we all ignored it for the most part. But a $30 move was just insanely crazy. I'm surprised also the fact that Dash and Airbnb together are just doing so well overall. Just because of the fact that I was not expecting it to be so much in the demand right now. I mean, some at one point I think they were just dying endlessly, and now it just feels like after the earnings, it's like really right back towards their highs or where they're pushing. So definitely a good sign. I mean, Dash nowhere near its highs though. I mean, that one was insanely crazy. I think it was pushing north of like 200 at one point. But solid momentum. I think we'll look at Dash come tomorrow morning more so, because I'm sure if I go through my levels right now on Dash, it's not even gonna be remotely to what we're probably gonna look at tomorrow morning. So I'll look at that one tomorrow morning, and hopefully I have an update on live there tomorrow for DoorDash. But that was pretty much the two that caught my name. I think Airbnb is more so up my alley right now. Tommy, you said JPM. Almost missed that note. Let me see what JPM actually looks like real quick. So pretty much looked like we had a nice little rising wedge type action. See a nice little breakdown somewhat. And so basically what you're looking at right now is more so of a retest. That's potentially what I'm looking at right now. So as I pretty much set this flat right now, this is basically what you're looking at in terms of you broke down from your support level. You got the beautiful retest. You're consolidating some weight here in maybe what I would say is a box. If you see the little box here, and I pretty much put this in a different color, you'll see the little range that you're sitting in. So you're sitting in this little range right now after getting a retest from breaking the downtrend. So now I'm going to look to see, all right, are we going to end up breaking out of this resistance, breaking north of 156 here, and getting a further retest, further push towards the resistance here of 158, or do we end up rejecting and breaking down below this 154 mark, and then filling the gap here that's currently sitting right towards 152.80. So those are your two zones in which you're watching for right now. Very small, relatively move. I think just the fact that we have so much pressure with the whole rate hike, it seems like the banks are holding up a lot better than I expected. There was a point where I saw this breaking down. I'm like, all right, we're gonna end up getting a quick retest, and the banks overall are gonna end up breaking down. I think Goldman Sachs was also one I was potentially watching also. If you see, we pretty much also broke our uptrend here on Goldman Sachs as well. So I expected this one to pretty much flush as well. I think I had my resistance sitting right around up here. Yeah, and we had the retest up here. We got the breakdown, and then we had the quick retest, and as you see, it is trending downward. But JPM is just not doing pretty much reflecting that way as well. So we pretty much feel like we're consolidating out of the banks. I just need to see a little bit more come tomorrow morning. So it may be in terms of the sector that we'll have to wait to see how it's doing collectively. And then we'll be able to get a better idea if we're going to break out from this little consolidations that we're having or if we're going to break down from them. All right. But yeah, banks are a little bit more in a tough area. I know that energy wasn't doing so hot also. So banks and energy collectively, I think they're pretty much just a small regression to consolidation that we're getting. So I'll have to pretty much look at the sectors come tomorrow morning, and we'll be taking a peep at that. All right. But other than that, I think that pretty much covers SPY and what I was watching for in terms of going into tomorrow. I'm not looking too much in terms of the tech sector, and that's why you don't see I have too many names other than maybe looking at Tesla, just because of the fact that I know that Tesla's price action is just so fluid. But I think collectively, in terms of the tech sector, we're gonna have to see how the market performs tomorrow to get a beautiful continuation. If the market's gonna be up, we're gonna see where Microsoft and Apple is gonna be showing its strength, and we'll be looking at the levels tomorrow morning. I think today we saw the most strength from the Qs were pretty much out of Amazon. Amazon had the most strength out of that. And I did have Amazon actually on the watch list yesterday, if you remember that. It was just a beautiful little price action, nice little megaphone action, beautiful little wedge. We got the little breakout, and we have some resistance that we're pretty much going to smack our heads on in terms of if we get momentum out of this one to continue. We had the nice little breakout, got the retest, got the continuation. Nice little dip into the end of the day there with the market. So nice little zone that I have sitting here right around 31.89 to 31.33. We'll see that zone as a potential resistance. And then we also do have the gap fill here that completes at 32.14. So watching continuation on this one going into tomorrow, but we are going to need the market momentum here to continue to really aid on getting the Qs higher. So that's what I really want to wait to see till morning. And like you see, I mean, I hit some levels yesterday on like Amazon and so much, but just the fact of how the overall market is moving, it really changes the dynamic of what the market looks like the next morning. So kind of tough to look at some of those names until the morning of once you see what the price action pretty much gives you. And that's why it's just been a whipsaw in either direction so far. All right. But I think that pretty much concludes what I'm looking at so far. We'll see what the market gives us, and we'll go from there tomorrow morning. But that kind of concludes what I'll be looking at tonight. And I'll wait till tomorrow morning to see if there's anything else that catches my attention. Any continuation off of those names that had earnings today, the AMAT, DoorDash, Nvidia. In terms of that, also the chips collectively. Maybe there's a bigger move out of the chip names tomorrow, hopefully. Maybe following some upgrades off of Nvidia. So that'll be something I also keep an eye on collectively. But again, 446 I think needs to hold on SPY if you're a bull. I would expect to get continuation. Retest 448. Let's see 450 potentially. Otherwise, if we lose 446, then we're going down towards 443, and we have that gap for the complete at 440, 440, in which we break below 440. That's going to be just a mess that we're going to pretty much look at. So, also again, those of you that didn't hear me earlier, we do have the Fed speakers tomorrow also. Bullard speaks about 11:30 a.m. Eastern tomorrow morning, so that's something we'll keep an eye on. And then there is another Fed speaker tomorrow as well towards the afternoon, I believe around 2 p.m. Eastern. Don't quote me on that, but we'll probably give it an update there tomorrow morning on live, and we'll keep an eye to see how they pretty much rackle the market, if there's any meaningful headline out of that and what they comment about. All right, but again, that concludes tonight. I'll see you guys on live tomorrow morning, but you guys have a great afternoon, and I'm out.